Hi, okay, I'm going to explore some of the highlights of my career as well as some personal moments from social media. So get ready for a little look behind the scenes of my life. So this is from Soldier Soldier. I went along for the audition. I got a call from my agent in the morning, and I will be perfectly honest with you, it was a long time ago, and I had a little bit of a hangover because I didn't think I had anything to do that day. So I went along thinking I was going up for a small part in one of the episodes. When I got there, I realized that this was for a new regular. So I sort of thought, oh wow, this is a much bigger deal than I thought. And I ended up doing 3 series. It also spawned my very short-lived singing career because after the first 2 series, Marsha became a club singer with a drink problem. And Virgin picked up the song that I sang in the show. Simon Cowell was going to sign me, then he dumped me. And I heard years later it was because Robson didn't want to have somebody else from the same show on the label. Anyway, Virgin swooped in and my song went straight to number 23 in the charts, and then straight out the following week. But I was a top 30 phenomenon. Natalie Horrocks. I was in my late 30s, and it was then watched by, well, maybe 20, 21 million people per episode on a good day. That's a third of this country. Because of course we only had 4 TV channels. There was no social media, there was no YouTube. And Coronation Street was going through a real high, and the character just became somebody that you love to hate. But in order for her to stay, which they wanted, and then for her ultimately to become the landlady of the Rover's Return, they had to soften her to a degree. But I remember Natalie got the keys to the Rover's Return. I remember looking up outside the street in real life, looking up and seeing Natalie Brahms, proprietor of the Rover's Return, and phoning mum and dad and going, can you believe I'm the landlady of the Rover's Return? Because in those days, for anybody who has watched it for as many years as I had, it was just the most iconic role on television. So this was me winning one of the 2 TV Quick Awards that I won for Waterloo Road. I was cast very late for this because they had been looking for someone physically very different to me. And I eventually begged them for an audition and said, look, please let me audition for this. I don't think the physicality matters. Can I, it's a series that I really want to be involved in. I pushed my way to the front of the audition queue, and the rest is history. So sometimes you've got to put yourself out there. Winning an award and doing well in your career is fantastic, but for me it was always about telling my parents about it, particularly my dad, although they were both incredibly proud and supportive. So when I was about 17, I thought, well, I'm good at drama, I'll teach drama. So I'd applied to teacher training college, and it was my dad and my drama teacher, Terry, who said, why don't you go to drama school? And I didn't even know anything about drama school. So I applied to Mount View Theatre School in London, and I got accepted at Mount View. And because my first name's Jacqueline, which I never used, my parents never used it, it's just the most stupid thing they did is call me Jacqueline Denise and then never use the Jacqueline. But when my acceptance letter for Mount View came in and it said, Dear Jacqueline, I knew it was for me, but I rang them and said, are you sure you haven't made a mistake? Because I just couldn't believe I'd got in and it meant I didn't have to pass any A-levels. That was the start of my career, and I'm so grateful that I had parents who encouraged me, because when I got to drama school, most of the kids there, their parents had been horrified and said, no, do something else. My parents always wanted me to follow my dream, and that's what I've continued with my kids, and they are. Dancing on Ice. I absolutely loved it. I had been a huge fan of it before, and I desperately wanted Matt Evers as my skating partner, and I got Matt Evers. They didn't know I wanted Matt Evers, but I did get Matt Evers, and he's become a friend for life. So, and it's funny because I wasn't scared of falling or the ice. I don't know why. I was scared of forgetting the routine. I was scared of looking ridiculous. I was scared that because I've suffered in the past, you know, with mental health issues. I was terrified that the fear and the adrenaline would cause me to be poorly before a show, because it's a live show in front of millions of people. But I did 9 weeks in the show. The judges voted me terribly because I was not as good as many of the others. But what was fantastic was the public vote. If you're bottom of the leaderboard, the public have to vote in their droves to get you through. So every week I got through, I knew how many people had voted for me in the public. So it was just a wonderful experience. Celebrity Big Brother. I was very grateful to win it, but it was a kind of a hollow victory for me because I was at quite a vulnerable place in my life. My husband and I were in the process of separating, but the public didn't know. Well, we had separated, but the public didn't know. And I probably shouldn't have gone in, but I was committed to it. And until those doors open on eviction night, you have no idea what's happening in the real world. And then what happens is a very bizarre thing. When the doors open and you hear all the cheering, and then, for example, they would say, Natalie Cassidy, because she was in there with me. I love Natalie from EastEnders. And they'd go, Natalie Cassidy, and the audience would cheer and whoop and scream. And then they'd go, Michael Madsen. And the people would go, ooh. And then they say, and the person being evicted tonight is Natalie Cassidy. And you think, but that's not, why? Everybody's just cheered for Natalie. She's brilliant, she's funny, she's my best friend in here. And you've voted her out. So instead of thinking that the more you're not voted out, the more popular you are, your mind starts worrying, thinking, they're keeping you in here because they don't like you. And Michael Madsen wasn't being very nice to me. And so they're enjoying seeing that dynamic of him and I not getting on, and that's why they're keeping us in. And it was just a very lonely time for me in there. I felt very lonely and very isolated, and I didn't like some of the people, and I'm not very used to that. But I won it, and you know, as I say, I was very grateful. But then people had been selling stories on me at the time when I was in there, and so it just wasn't a very nice time for me. But hey ho, you live and learn. That's me very heavily pregnant in our flat in London. I think I was about probably 9 months pregnant. I loved every minute of being pregnant. My hair was blooming, my skin was great, I felt well. It was after that everything went wrong. Matthew was born 8 pounds. He was a healthy, gorgeous little boy, and everything was brilliant. And then when he was 5 days old was when I had, out of the blue, I wasn't even nervous or anxious, I had my first ever panic attack, and that made my whole ability to feed my child just stopped. And nowadays, 34 years later, that would be a massive hormonal red flag. In those days, it went unnoticed and uncared about, really. And had it not been for my family, things would have been very different. So I loved being pregnant, but it was 12 years before I got pregnant again with Louis, because I was frightened of the same thing happening. Matty was very aware of the fact that Mummy was sometimes poorly, so I would call it my thing. I've got my thing. And of course, when you're small, how and why you're ill doesn't really mean very much. You're just ill. But then many, many years later, when he achieved his incredible international success with his band, the 1975, he wrote a song called She Lays Down. He didn't tell me when he was writing it, he just told me when he'd written it. And I still find it hard to listen to now, because everything that I had told him when he'd grown up about what my illness was, which has meant that my kids have incredible empathy and understanding of anyone with mental illness or mental health issues. And Matty has, you know, had some of his own, which he's been open about. This song, She Lays Down, he called it that because I said that I used to lay down next to him and pray. I'm not religious, but pray to whatever, for the ability to help me love my son again, because depression robbed me of the ability to love my child. And when he sings it, he always chokes up when he sings it, because it's part of his growing up process. This is basically a before and after. I became sober 11 years ago with my husband Lincoln, and I've talked openly for years about my history of clinical depression, which started when I had Matty. and I was incredibly busy trying to work and look after a kid. And anyway, eventually drink was the only thing that would stop the pain, and it led to several years of spiraling out of control. And I was in a really bad place, and anybody who's had to give up alcohol knows that you've got to reach rock bottom, and rock bottom is your rock bottom. It's not somebody else's rock bottom. You've got to reach your rock bottom. And I did. And I had already met my husband. The only thing we ever have to thank alcohol for is that we met in a nightclub at 6 a.m. that doesn't open till 4. And together we found the strength and the anchor in each other to stop. So we've been 11 years sober, and outside of having my children, it's the thing I'm the most proud of, because when you become sober, you don't just make your life better, you change and improve the life of everybody who loves you. Me and my hubby, he's everything to me. If my marriage is good, I'm good, and we have an amazing marriage, and we have sobriety to thank for that marriage. We like to do everything together. We don't like being apart. I now choose jobs based on how often I'm going to see Lincoln. And when my dad died, I felt like I've lost the only person who never judged me. And Lincoln said to Dad, I'm never going to judge her. And he never does. He has my back more than anybody has ever had my back in my entire life. And he's an incredibly successful painter. And he was running Stringfellows nightclub in the PR and marketing department when I met him, because his dad died when he was 14. And he had to go out and earn money for the family. So any creative aspirations or talents he had couldn't really be nurtured. He just had to earn money. And that's how his life was after that. And then we got sober, and he's built this career for us. And I just love seeing him go from strength to strength. We've been married 10 years in July the 13th, unlucky for some, but not for us. When you are sober, the last thing you want to do is throw a big party, because I am not paying for all my friends just to get absolutely hammered, and I have to leave at 8:30 because none of them will remember what they said. For our anniversary, we are just going to go somewhere very quiet, just the two of us. That's me and me boys, who I love with all my heart. Louis is a young actor. His third series of Hotel Portofino has just been recommissioned, which he starts filming again in Croatia. And Matty is creator and founder of the 1975 when he's touring in the UK. And I go to the shows, and they'll see me come out, and I'm either in the guest area or, in Brighton, we were right along the front. And the few people spot you, and then the word goes round, and they all wave up, and then all of these thousands of people all sort of wave, and they're all absolutely lovely. And I'm just really thrilled for him that he has such, great, amazing fans who have followed the 1975 from their inception, really. My kids never wanted fame for fame's sake. They actually shy away from it. They won't even come on television programs with me. And I've said, but they want to talk to you about such and such. No, not in a million years. And Matthew told a funny story in an interview. They said, there's all this stuff going on about the Nepo babies. And he said, well, I read recently, how can Matty Healy be the son of the gobby one off Loose Women and the transvestite from Benidorm? And he said, I really lucked out at the Nepo baby nursery. So nothing that we did could ever have helped him in his journey to what he did. He's a very, very brilliant songwriter. His dad's very musical. I'm not so much. I can sing a bit, and I've done some musicals. But there was lots of music in the house, and we had this house when he was growing up, and there was a garage space. And the boys formed a band at 13, 14 years old. So the 1975 is 20 years old. The band's been going 20 years. And they pretty much lived and grew up. And some of the songs, I went to Madison Square Garden, and Matthew sings Chocolate. And I think, God. And everybody in America, 20,000 people standing there knowing the words of all his songs. And I'm thinking he wrote that when he was like 16. And I was shouting, shut up! I've got to get up for work in the morning. And now it's wonderful to see him up there. I'm very, very proud. Happy birthday to me, 65 years old. I can't actually believe it when I say I'm going to be 65. I don't feel any different. Lots of people will say that. I feel better in my 60s than I did in my 40s and 50s. In my 40s and 50s, I was still drinking. Yes, I had some good times, but I had some very dark times. I don't have those times as dark as that anymore. My 60s, I absolutely love. Personal goals for the future are to be around as long as possible to see the continuing success of my children, to have more grandchildren and be well enough to enjoy them, no pressure kids, to remain happily married and in good health. And professionally, I don't really have any major ambitions. Maybe if I was forced to say a bonnet drama. People don't tend to see me in a bonnet. I don't know why, because I look really good in a bonnet. So if anybody out there wants to offer me a lovely bonnet drama, I'll take it. Otherwise, I'm happy where I am.